And I am very excited to be able to introduce our next speaker to you. For our first featured speaker today, we are very excited to welcome Jessica DeGroot to the Teacher Wellness Summit. Jessica is the president and the founder of the ThirdPath Institute, which is a national nonprofit that helps men and women as parents and as leaders to develop integrated solutions around how they approach work and life so that they can feel successful in both. Now, who doesn't want that? ThirdPath Institute provides resources to individuals and families, as well as to leaders who are interested in supporting an integrated approach from entry level to executive level in the workplace. Jessica and her husband live in Philadelphia, and they both learned a lot putting these ideas into practice themselves as they raise their two children and now care for aging parents. So we are so excited to be able to hear from Jessica DeGroot today. And I will tell you, before we get started, Jessica has been a personal inspiration to me and my family as we have learned a considerable amount from her and from the ThirdPath Institute. And I just know that you're going to love the message that she brings, and you're going to find the work that she does so, so important. So if you'll join me in welcoming Jessica DeGroot, what we're going to do next in our session is we're going to invite you again to use the chat window to share some reactions, some thoughts and questions. And then if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to invite you to keep your video on if that's possible, so that Jessica can have some faces in the gallery to see while she is also giving her presentation. But without any further ado, I'm going to switch and allow Jessica to share the screen, and we will welcome
Great.
Jessica DeGroot to the Teacher Wellness Summit.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. It takes me a second to get my technology going. So hold on. I got to put my share screen, and I got to say start from beginning. Slideshow, start from beginning. Okay, great. Super. Hey, wow, and I just got a chance to talk to somebody who has put these ideas into practice already. So, and Gary, thank you for your kind words. We are a 20-plus-year-old organization that has been fighting for some pretty big ideas for a long, long time. And in a weird way, the pandemic helped us show the world that what we've been fighting for is really possible. So we're a nonprofit. We've been around for, as I said, 20 plus years. And if you were going to sum up what we look at into 3 bullet points, which is always hard to do when you have a 20-year experience, the first is thinking about how you can do work differently. Now that's interesting. In a teacher career, the person I was just talking to, it's an on-site experience, we thought, especially before the pandemic. And it's a very full experience. People get into teaching because they really care about it. And so it often blends into, thinking about it in the mornings and the evenings and weekends and maybe even on vacations. But our job at ThirdPath is to help people think about maybe the way we can do that work differently. Maybe we can job share. We're going to talk more about that. And a really critical ingredient about our work is showing that men and women can think differently about their work. Because when we help people think about this, and families, for example, think about this together, they happen to be a mom and a dad family, it helps the whole family develop a more flexible solution, not just in the moment, but for the long run. And I'll talk more about that in a second too. And although it might feel connected or not connected to you personally, a big part of our job has been thinking about how we can do this differently for career paths and as what leaders model. I think that's a hard one in the teaching profession. I look at principal jobs as one of the hardest jobs to redesign and have time for life. But certainly in corporate America and some of the businesses and leaders we work with, there's been some really great role modeling from leaders around how to do things differently. And when they role model something different, it makes it possible for the whole organization to do things differently. So what do we face as a problem? I think one of the biggest problems we face is, whether or not you can work flexibly, it's how much work we do. And I describe this as chronic overwork. So your glass is very full and your work is spilling into the evenings, and there's other urgent work that's taking up your time. And maybe there's some very important, quote unquote, big rocks that you're not getting to, whether those are on the work side, developing your next goal for yourself around your career, or on the personal side. And the list could be quite long about what maybe you're sacrificing on the personal side. And this problem became even worse, I'm imagining, for you guys during the pandemic. And I just want to thank you. I just want to stop right now and thank you. I really want to thank you for what you guys did for the last couple of years. I have tears, right at the cusp of my thanks, because I can only imagine what this is like for you guys to get through sudden change and manage your own needs getting through the pandemic, and then care for your kids. And I know you did a great job caring for your kids. So I just want to say thanks, because I imagine the last couple of years were pretty challenging. But what we at ThirdPath try to encourage you to think about, and maybe as you heal from the last couple of years, because I think it's a healing process. I think we're all a little traumatized in some ways from what we've been through. It takes a little while to heal from those things. But as we look ahead, what we encourage people to think about is, we all have a certain amount of energy. And to live life well, you want some of your time and energy to give to work and some of it to relationships and family. But to do that and do it well, we also need to really have some recharge time. And what we've learned at ThirdPath, and I'm not going to have enough time to give you lots of details about this, is that when we encourage people to think this way, it often helps them improve how they get their work done. When I give myself space as a leader at ThirdPath to take time to recharge and think bigger, it helps my organization be more effective and for us to focus our attention on what's most important. And the reason I have two batteries up there, again, you might be a single parent, you might be a single person, but in two-parent households, when both parents think this way, boy, the sky is the limit, because there's so many options for us to live healthier, better lives. All right, so again, too short a time to think about how we could redesign work in a teaching position. But Gary helped me think about a few, and I bet if you've come across some yourself, you could add to the conversation by putting these ideas into the chat box. But maybe some of you have job shared. My fantasy, it's still a fantasy, is in the teaching world, you'd understand that a normal part of the life cycle is probably having kids at some point. Not for everybody, but for many people. And what if schools could understand that was the normal part of the life cycle, and they could set up job shares as a routine solution when people transitioned into parenthood, so a more senior teacher could inspire and mentor a more junior teacher and have time and energy for their lives and their new family role. You could work a reduced teaching schedule. Gary was talking about how you could change things around and take on a teacher leadership position. So you're teaching part-time, but doing something that's asynchronous work that can be done at a different time, flexed around your life responsibilities. You could become an educational specialist. That also provides a little bit more flexibility. Or, as we've learned a lot about in the last 2 years, you could teach in a virtual school. Or maybe your school's even considering keeping something virtual. I don't know. I'm going to learn from you guys about this, and I hope you'll put some ideas in the chat box if you've experienced some solutions around this, or that you'll talk about them when we get to Q&A. Most importantly, something we can all learn about is be strategic about what we say yes to, and therefore what we say no to. The person I was just talking to learned he needed to say no to something. He was literally, the quote he said was, spinning too many plates. And so he needed to put a plate down. And so we all need to learn that skill and hone that skill for the rest of our lives, because I'll tell you, it never stops being required to make some choices and to figure out what's most important to you. All right, so let's say you want to embrace an integrated life. What do you want to make time for? Well, if you look at those words at the bottom of the page, work-life integration across the life cycle. We might have started 20 years ago as an organization helping parents think about these issues, but as I have progressed through many different moments in my life cycle, I've really learned this is a skill set and a mindset that I can use forever. Shortly after my youngest went off to college, my first experience with elder care happened literally pretty much the same week. And then we had a pretty exhausting 4-year experience around elder care, and I'm still dealing with elder care today. And so there is going to be something that you're learning across the life cycle around creating this integrated approach. And I feel like the mindset my husband and I set up 31 years ago has helped us solve each one of those next life cycle challenges or opportunities. But in general, the list on the left are things that really we can accomplish by following a more integrated approach. Stronger relationships with our children, stronger relationships as a couple. That's something else I was talking to the person I was paired up with. This is really about building the life you want together. And I think, again, not everybody's got a partner at home, but even if you're co-parenting and separately, you have time to think about how you want to handle the next phase of your lives as parents or future elder care caregivers. You have more time to take care of yourself for exercise, less rushed weekends. A lot of the families who are part of ThirdPath have figured out how to flex their work so they can get some of those weekend things done during the work week. A load of laundry done because they're working remotely for part of the week. You know, getting the grocery shopping done at a different time of day when it's less crowded. And in general, I think there's an opportunity of more connection as a family, including a simple but powerful thing of more dinners together as a family. So lots and lots of opportunities around creating this integrated approach. Again, 20 years of information is hard to compress into a 30-minute discussion. So I wanted to make sure I provided a free resource. Again, we are a nonprofit. We try to make a lot of free resources available to you. And we have a beautiful resource, our ThirdPath Leader Guide, that you can download that has lots of exercises around how you can think differently around work-life integration and create a team at home as you both reach for this goal. All right, what are some of the basics? Because I said, yes, we can work differently, and how do we want to do that? But boy, does it make a difference if you've created a team approach at home to think about your goals. In fact, no surprise, the person I was talking to had this wonderful story where first his partner made a change, and then 6 years later, he made a change. That's what we're talking about. Teamwork is each person supporting themselves and their family to achieve their best collective selves. And so, you know, the very first thing in a team approach at home is to think of it as we're in this together. How do we support each other to meet our family needs, meet our financial needs, meet our career needs over time? Because you can pace yourself and figure out solutions better if you work together. You also need to address the unique needs of your family. If anybody's got kids that are 31 like mine on this call, you can tell that that time when your kids are little is very quick. It doesn't feel like it when you're in the middle of it, but it goes by really fast, and their needs change significantly from the new parent stage to the young school age stage to the teenage stage. Very different needs for your children and for you as a family. You can work together to create a common schedule, so it's not one parent's burden to carry the mental load, but collectively, the whole family, if your kids are old enough, can play a part in it to understand what needs to happen as a family. I have this one family we've worked with for a long time who has this big whiteboard in their kitchen. Never the most attractive thing, but she took it with her when they moved to a new house because collectively they looked at it every Sunday night. It mapped out their upcoming week, and it became the family's a family approach to thinking about how do we make the best week possible. Not the moms, not the dads. It was the family's approach to think about that. In fact, that's the whole idea. You can get your children involved in making this work as they get a little older. There's a lot to value. My kids are both excellent chefs. They saw us cook, and as they got older, they started helping cooking too, and cleaning, dishwashing too. So most importantly, as you think about a team approach at home, you can collectively think about how do we really recharge too. Our kids are watching us. And if we come home and we're noses in our phones and we're thinking about work, and over the weekends, our nose is in our phones and we're thinking about work, guess what? When they're old enough to have those phones, their nose is going to be in their phones too. So they're watching you, and we need to really think about what we're modeling and how to model. Time together, fun time together as a family is key. All right, I mentioned that the needs will change. I'm going to maybe I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see some faces. I'm going to explain what this picture is, and then I'm going to go off my slides for a second and so I can see everybody's faces, because I want to see who's in which phase of this stages of family. You know, you can be in that new family stage, and it is pretty exhausting. And I would argue if you have older kids, but one of your kids is in that infant toddler stage, it's still the new family stage. Even though you're a little bit more experienced, you're still probably not getting the sleep you need. You can be in that young school age stage, which I actually think is a lot of fun. Your kids still look at you and think of you as role models and experts, and but there's still some challenges when balancing work and family, although I'm curious, maybe summers are a little less stressful if you have a teaching schedule. And then you can get to the teenage stage. Again, things change, but from a work-family balance point of view, you probably don't want your kids coming home to an empty house. You're trying to figure out what does that look like, and you're still trying to imagine what are summers like for your teenager. And then you have, kids who leave, because they will one time. It's hard to believe when you have young ones. And the idea is that you are needing to think about what do you want next, maybe for your job, maybe for your aging parents. There's a lot of change that happens. Maybe you become a grandparent. There's a lot of change that can happen in the mature career stage. Let's just stop for a second and see if we have a sense of, I'm going to go to gallery view. Good. I see a few people. Okay, of the people I see, any of you in the new parent stage? Any of you in the new parent? Okay. How you doing on sleep? Need a little more sleep? Does it sound, any of you in that young school age stage, 12 and under? Are you enjoying it? Is that's kind of a fun stage. They really look to you, Pamela, and say, hey, my mom knows a lot. It's kind of a fun stage. How about teenagers? Anybody got teenagers? Okay. It's an interesting stage. I called it the sine wave stage, my husband and I, because my kids could change their mood as quick as a sine wave and be so loving and so happy with us, and then 30 seconds later be so frustrated. And I think it's just, what is the word? Of course, I've never seen your moment, but the chemistry of their bodies just changing, and it's just, just the way it's going to be. But they do get past that, and they get back to it loving you at some point, probably too. Anybody dealing with aging parents? You might have young kids and aging parents. Anybody dealing with aging parents? Yeah. Okay. So some of you are in sandwich generation. You are dealing with aging parents, and you are dealing with families, which is going to become a lot of us as time goes on. So hats off to you. There is these, intense moments when our aging parents need a lot of us, and we are also caring for our kids. And all I can tell you is that I've really been impressed with how my husband became such a good caregiver alongside of me. And so as we've been dealing with aging parents, we are both equally capable of really supporting each other and our aging parents. And that's been a real unexpected benefit of that teamwork we created a long time ago. Wonderful. Thanks. All right. So I'm going to go back to sharing another screen. around sharing. And we'll go back to from current slide. Okay. All right, so, and I should pay attention to the clock. Oh, good, we're doing good. Okay, hey, so thanks to Gary. So this is like the Mutual Admiration Club, Gary, you and me. We have learned a lot together. And one of the things that I hope Gary will share with you at some point, maybe even in the Q&A, is how money can play into our challenges around work-life integration. Both in a very real way, we might need to work long hours in multiple jobs just to make ends meet, and that just might be our truth. And I hope one day we live in a society that that's not the truth. Or we might be in what Gary calls this kind of hurtful family financial cycle. And he'll tell you more about his story if we have time. But it can be where we get caught up in a cycle where we work a lot, we earn a lot, but we're home less. And so we have less time to do some of those home activities. So we outsource more. So we spend more. So we save less. So we work more. And I want to thank Gary for creating this very simple visual to explain a trap those of us who have a little wiggle room might feel stuck in. And again, I want to recognize there are families that are not in this trap. They are just working to make sure they have enough food on the table. But for those of us who feel like this makes sense and this is kind of where we are, Gary's got a pretty inspiring story about how to get out of this trap. And it's something we at ThirdPath talk a lot about, because the crazy truth is, once we get out of the trap, I found that I used to call myself a slacker family because, you know, my husband and I didn't do much activities with our kids after school. I was in charge of them a couple days a week. He was in charge of them a couple days a week. They'd come home. We'd maybe go to the park. We'd cook cookies or make food, and I'd teach them how to make a simple dish. But like, it became actually recharging as opposed to exhausting to do those activities, because we had enough time and energy in our family system to incorporate family care as a way to actually feel recharged as opposed to feeling exhausted. So I could have put up the second cycle, which is this more positive family financial cycle. But that's the point, is that if we can step out of the negative one, the hurtful one, there really is an opportunity to readjust and recalibrate and feel like we are in a healthier financial cycle. All right, so we're almost at the end of where I want to get to. I like to share some stories as a way to inspire you about some simple concepts that I hope you'll take away with. The first one is a story about Roger and Schimmel. Their photograph is right there. I love this story because Roger and Schimmel, now their child is, their oldest, the son right there is 13 years old. But when he was born, they both worked for a large company, Fortune 100. And Schimmel was trying to figure out how she was going to balance work and family, and pulling her hair out, trying to figure out how she wanted to stay committed to her career, but also be the kind of parent she wanted to be. And so she was kind of like wrestling with this idea, and Roger said, "Hey, honey, I work for the same organization as you do. I have the same benefits as you do." And Schimmel had not even considered that. But once they started realizing, hey, we can both change our schedules, we can do this together, she stopped feeling so alone with this challenge and instead created an incredible partnership that they've been doing now for 13 years. They both reduced their schedules, and they both were able to become experts in caring for their children and experts in how to set limits in a job that would take every minute that they'd give it. And then they created a lot more flexibility in the system because they had already figured out how to share care. When the child was sick, there probably was a parent at home already that could help out with that. And again, I understand that some of this might be harder in the teaching world, but you know, there are job shares, there is reduced hour schedules. If you can afford those options, if you can develop those options, there's ways to think differently where both parents really are thinking outside the box. That's the message of the story, getting both parents to think outside the box. I want to tell you about Ivan's story. Ivan has become this champion for work-life integration. And Ivan's a great story because he started flexing for caring for his granddaughter, who also happens to be now 13 years old. And then 2 years later, he incorporated his grandson into this solution. He is part of the executive team of a 150-person boutique accounting firm. And so 13 years ago, Ivan started working remotely. Well, actually not working on Mondays and working a compressed work week so that he could care for his granddaughter. In fact, it's good that I stumbled over that he thought he was going to work remotely on Mondays, but since Ivan had never cared for an infant before, he quickly learned he couldn't work and care for an infant on Mondays, and instead turned it into a compressed work week, doing a little bit of work on Sundays, a little bit of work on Monday nights. And there's just so many stories I could tell you about how Ivan learned how to work smarter because of this change. But the one I want to focus on, along comes the pandemic. Ivan had already been a champion at his organization of showing people that you could work remotely and that you could work differently. So guess what? When the pandemic hit, they turned to Ivan to figure out how are we going to all suddenly work remotely and work differently. And now when they look ahead, they're never going to be that same organization. They really are thinking differently about how to become a hybrid workplace that supports everybody to work in a more flexible way. So thank you, Ivan. You have been a mentor and changed your organization because of your personal commitment to integrated life. And last but not least, if you're not inspired, let me tell you one more fun story. You can actually hear this story. We have a free webinar every Thursday, second Thursday of the month that you can attend. You can find them on our website, and you can find the recordings on our website. And if you went to the February recording, you would hear more about Michelle's story. Michelle is one of my board members, and she did something called a flex year solution, where she is an accountant, so she had a very busy accounting season, but then would take almost 2 months off in the summers to hang out with her kids. But what you hear in the February story is her daughter, Cameron, and how Cameron watched her two parents work as a team. And she described it as, like a fish in water, I didn't know I was observing something different until I went off to college and talked to my friends. And they were like, your father does laundry? Your father was there to cook dinners in the evening? And she said, yeah, and yours wasn't? So what you can see from these stories is, yes, I'm encouraging you to think about this work-life integration mindset for yourself. But I hope what you take away from this is you can become a mentor and a role model to those at your workplace, and you will become a mentor and role model to your children as well. So please take a look for our free resources. You can download that ThirdPath Leader Guide. You can find out more about our free Thursday webinars. We try to be a resource, not only for you, maybe there's other parents you know who would be excited about what we're doing at ThirdPath Institute. We want to be something that really helps parents and leaders think in a new way so we can create a different kind of world for our children and for those children that you have in your classroom. Thanks.
Wow, Jessica, thank you so much. That is such a wonderful, refreshing message. It's something that I don't know about you, but the first time I heard this message, I was like, where has this been my whole life? Like, this is a message that I do not remember hearing anywhere. So I don't know if that's the same with all of you, but hopefully you found this one equally powerful. What we'd like to do next, we did put some resource links in the chat window for you, as well as the graphic that Jessica mentioned earlier. But we want to invite you to be able to just real quick, before we even get to live Q&A, we'd love to invite you to share what was one thing that you liked or learned in Jessica's talk there. Just go ahead and post that in the chat. We'd love to be able to share some takeaways. I was supposed to do that earlier, And I just got the reminder that I did not do that with Matinga's talk. So we'll first ask you to share something you liked or learned in this talk in the chat. And then we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A after that.
And while you guys are thinking about what you liked and learned, I've learned that sometimes what I talk about feels, and the best word to use is overwhelming. Where do I begin? This feels like a pipe dream. What are you talking about? I can't imagine how to set boundaries around my work. I can't imagine having that team at home. You know, it just feels hard to imagine. And I get that. I really get that. And we can talk a little bit in the Q&A about what's a first step, because there are some really wonderful first steps you can do. So if that's what you're feeling as you listen in today, oh my God, this feels impossible. You are not alone. We are here to help you. And there are some first steps that you can do. So I hope I hear from you about that if that's the case.
That's wonderful. Well, we've got some great takeaways coming through the chat already. Creating a team at home, finding the right mix and the boundary setting, recharging and the importance of recharging. We need that reminder that we can rearrange life to work better for us. Putting time into your family is more than just recharging. Liking the emphasis on work-life balance and family dinners. Making it work for everyone. Having the team at home is a great vision. And let's see here, making, let's see what this, oh, this one. So family and putting time in your family is more than just recharging, and making it more recharging than draining. And then finally, sharing a family calendar is an idea that someone pulled away out of this as well. So these are some really terrific takeaways. And what we'd like to do next is invite you to share some questions that you might have for Jessica. And then, kind of like we did in our first learning block, we'll invite you to unmute and elaborate on your question so you can ask it live.
Or if somebody has an example of an integrated approach that they've been testing out themselves, that would be great to hear too. Don't be shy. Somebody's got a question. Oh my God, it's impossible. How am I going to get my husband to think this way?
Maybe
oh my God, my employer is never going to accept this.
Why don't we start with that one? Those are probably on everyone's minds, at least to some degree or another. Why don't we start with the one that's maybe seems more within our sphere of influence? Why don't we start about the conversation at home? How do you start this conversation at home with your partner or with your family, depending on the way things are for you? How does this conversation get started to get everyone moving towards establishing a same page, Jessica?
Well, I'm going to share some tips, but Gary, you've been through this. There was a process you and Janice went through where a big change happened. So after I give some tips, maybe there's something you can add to this. Because I think if you're in a family system, I'm just imagining, I don't know which situation you're in, but let's pretend you're in the situation where it feels like, you plunge into Monday morning and you resurface exhausted Friday afternoon, and then you do all your chores over the weekend, and then you plunge into Monday morning all over again. I don't know if that sounds familiar to many of you. Okay, I'm seeing some nodding heads. My hunch is, if that's your family system's experience, that it's just been exhausting, you're not alone in feeling that. What happens is couples argue because they're exhausted, but actually they can turn it around and become advocates for changing their lives. And so, again, it depends on the age of your kids, when you would do this, and how you do this, but, maybe some Saturday night, maybe you've got young enough kids that they go to sleep at a reasonable hour, and you can sit down and have a glass of wine and say, okay, and here's a shocker. One way to really wake up, think about how old your kids will be 5 years from now. And have you and your partner say, okay, 5 years from now, our kids are going to be X old. Suddenly they're going to go from 8 to, 13 years old. And then say, I'm guessing you're tired and I'm tired. And what do we, if we could imagine our lives different 5 years from now, what would it be? Not that we have to have answers, but do we want to be here? So just start a conversation where you're both trying to imagine a future that feels like you're off the gerbil wheel and you are back into the life that you want. I certainly heard a very inspiring story from somebody today about how they made some changes. And I know that, Gary's actually made some of these changes himself. And if you check out that ThirdPath Leader Guide, it is geared, I don't think there are any teacher stories in it, but I think you'll see there's some really good exercises you can use. There's actually a pretty cool compass handout where you, as a couple, you assess your current work-family solution and you kind of think together about how is it working. So there are some solutions in there, some handouts in there that you can pull out and think about. Last but not least, if you think your partner's not going to be really open to this, or not going to be your first person, or you don't have a partner to think about this, how about a friend? How about a really your favorite sister or brother? And how about talking to them and saying, hey, I need to make a change. And I'm wondering if you and I can spend regular time thinking about this. I'm going to share one more example of how I've set something up in my life that's free. Not my partner, it's somebody else who plays a role in helping me think big about my life. And I'll share that solution in a second. It's called two-person calls. But before I blab on, someone might have an idea or question about how do we make this change start at home that they'd like to comment on before I yak on about two-person calls. Anybody have a question, thought, comment? Is any of this resonating?
I'm curious, let's do a quick show of hands. How many of you well, let's do a show. We'll do a show of thumbs. This might be a better one. I love this teaching tool. Show of thumbs. So thumbs up, you think this could be workable for you. Thumb sideways, you're not sure yet. Thumbs down, you think you're going to run into some challenges with this. Where would you say you're at on kind of a show of thumbs with this? Okay.
Oh, good. Sum up. I can deal with that. That's also real.
So Tiffany, let's see if you wouldn't mind, you shared something in the chat. Would you be willing to elaborate a little bit about that in a way that you're comfortable, if you'd like?
Sure. So my husband is kind of a workaholic. He's a great husband. He does help at home. He's not a turd, he does laundry and dishes and makes dinner once in a while, but he gets home late and my kids have activities. So I end up working, and then after work, I drive them to all of their things, be it doctor's appointments, counseling, or sports or clubs or whatever. And then I come home and I make dinner, and then that's around 7 that we have dinner. We do have family dinner, but then that's it. Like that's the day, and I'm done. I'm toast, because I've been working since 6 in the morning. So, because I get the kids to school, from school, and all their stuff, and then in between I'm teaching. And then if I'm not done, I'm grading or lesson planning, And I just don't think my husband will or can help. He's not emotionally able to separate himself from work. So I don't know. I don't know how that would work for us as a family unit. Sharing the calendar is a great idea. There's no me time. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm sure a lot of moms know. So.
Oh, Tiffany, you are speaking for masses of people. You are speaking for masses of people. And what's so funny, Tiffany, is, because of the work we do, we have a wide range of dads who are in that role. They're the primary flexor, and the mom has a big job. The issue is the big job, and sometimes a person's dedication to that big job. And, I think there's a couple of ways that I'm thinking when I listen to you that could resonate when people listen to possible outcomes here. One is that you both have a slightly different goal around how you want to arrange things, and that's just going to be the truth. And your sense is that, things aren't going to change, and that this is more like, how do I make it work better for me, given that it's not going to change? That's one possibility. The other possibility is reframing it from what's in it. Why will this be better for both of us? And I can't speak for your situation, but again, going to that guide and looking for that handout that has that compass and starting to figure out how to think about what do we want. I know you love your husband. He's not a turd. But I got to tell you, Jeffrey, my husband, became an expert on relational stuff and helped my teenage daughters with some relational issues, my daughter and my cousin, my niece, because he became more involved with the family. Like he became a bigger person because of his roles at home. And along comes elder care. His parents need help. My parents need help. He understands. He can't expect me to take care of his parents. In fact, we need to help each other with each other's parents. So, maybe there's a way to frame it where this is us building a life together. And I'm not unhappy, oh husband, but I think there's a way we could become happier. And, and then to give him role models of, I have so many role models of men who put better boundaries around work, and I can introduce them to them. I mean, there's just so many inspiring examples of men who thought bigger about their lives. Men have been given a very small box to live in, and he might appreciate some ideas to think bigger. I'll tell you one last thing. Sometimes we need a friend to talk to about how frustrating it is to get to that point. So the person we talk to is the person we vent to. And then we're more flexible when we talk to the person we're hoping will change. And so we separate out, not the yelling part at our husband, our frustration part at our partner who's not changing. We find another person to talk to. And then that helps us keep a positive attitude when we're seeing if there is some common goals to reach for. And Tiffany, I don't know where you'll end up, but I do know that men are put into a box, and there's a real opportunity to help them step out of that box. But you stand for legions of women,
Thank you.
That's a great,
cool.
That's a great and encouraging word there for those situations. I don't know if anybody else who's connected to education has ever felt or been associated with workaholism, but for some reason it tends to creep up very sneakily on us in education. And it can consume even the best intentioned individuals. So if that is something that is an issue, that is one of the reasons why we think that this idea of personal development is so important. And conversations can sometimes just be, hey, I heard this interesting thing at this conference today. What do you think about that? How does that sit with you? And, Jessica mentioned that my wife and I have worked with ThirdPath Institute, and we learned a lot about just how to have those conversations with each other. And something as simple, and there are great tools that we put in the free resources in the chat that you can use. There is this compass that Jessica mentioned, where it basically asks you on different domains of life to rate your current level of satisfaction on like a 1 to 10 scale. And then the idea is you both do this exercise separately, and then you compare notes. Because as we talked about at the very beginning with that tree metaphor, if you're operating with a different set of roots or a different set of values for your trunk, it does make it a little bit more challenging to be able to grow that network of trees together and make a forest, if you will. So that conversation about where are we each now, and maybe having that separately and then coming together, I wonder if that could be a great way to use that tool that Jessica referenced. And again, in the chat window is the link to be able to access all of that.
And I just want to do one last shout out. I know my time is out. If you're a single parent trying to figure this stuff out, again, I think there is a way to use that same resource that Gary was talking about, and to find that friend, that sister, that brother that you can regularly talk to. Maybe they're also trying to figure something out. The key is, if you want to imagine this different way of living that then, as Gary pointed out, that many of us were never even exposed to, getting some support is critical to helping you. And I, 20 years into an integrated approach, still get regular support every Monday with a friend of mine, just where we talk about our work-life integration goals. So no matter what family system or where you are in the life cycle stage, get some support around your goals. You'll need that support for the long run too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica DeGroot. Everyone, thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And we're going to give everyone a chance now to be able to react to the talk that you just heard in small groups. So we'll be putting you into breakout rooms in just a moment here, where you'll get a chance to talk with others about what you just heard, share some of your reactions, and maybe kind of prompt yourselves to talk about, how do we put all of this into action? There might be an opportunity there for you to share and learn with one another and kind of brainstorm, how do we put this all into practice? So we're going to go ahead and put 10 minutes on the clock for you to have some time in breakout rooms. And then we'll see you back here for our next learning block in just a little bit.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.